10 young Americans board their B-17 Flying Fortress as dawn breaks over East Anglia. They will be battling for their lives at 6.5 kilometers over Nazi Germany in a few hours, where the lack of air itself turns into a deadly foe. Their oxygen masks quickly freeze their breath at Arctic winter temperatures. Frostbite strikes with the same merciless efficiency as the Luftwaffe fighters. These aircrew faced an unprecedented conflict in 1942 when the U.S. 8th Air Force launched its strategic bombing campaign against Hitler's Fortress Europe. Humans had never fought in the stratosphere before, and the thin, cold air there served as their battlefield. Before every operation, the air crews faced the perils of high-altitude combat together, even though the conditions were as deadly as the German Flak and fighters. Before a mission, Americans' bomber crews, comprised almost exclusively of young men, gather in pre-dawn darkness. For many, this short ride to their waiting B-17 Flying Fortress is the most agonizing part of the mission, the moment when fear peaks. If it's going to hit you, it's going to hit you then. Whatever peak of fear, anxiety, or urge to turn back that you're going to feel, recalled Captain Robert Morgan, pilot of the Memphis Belle. Being underway is actually a relief. It's that damn ride to the plains that nearly kills you. On the airstrip at Bassingbourn, Morgan calls his crew into a huddle like a football team. His voice is quiet, the words almost unimportant. The important thing, Morgan recalled, was that this was our huddle, our moment to come together among ourselves, to hear one another's breathing, feel one another's hands on our shoulders, to experience that instant when we stopped being 10 separate entities and became one. These wisecracking American boys suddenly have the solemnity and level gazes of men twice their age. It was 10 minds coming into acute focus. As the newly established 8th Air Force readied itself to embark on a challenging mission in the skies over Europe, these touching moments of solidarity were really the calm before the storm. America fully entered the war after the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941. The United States Army Air Forces started deploying to airfields around the English countryside in the summer of 1942, as Stalin frantically desperately called for a second front against Hitler's Reich. Under General Ira Eaker, the 8th Air Force had a difficult task: demonstrate that precision daylight bombing could be successful in areas where the RAF's night operations had yielded only patchy results. That August, the first American B-17s, accompanied by RAF Spitfires, hit objectives in occupied France. The harsh environmental difficulties that lay ahead were not fully revealed by these early missions, most taking place at 3 kilometers, 9,800 feet in altitude. However, American bombers were pushed farther and farther into the stratosphere, up to 6 kilometers and beyond, where neither men nor machines had ever engaged in combat before, as German defenses grew more rigid and the targets were inside the Reich itself. Here, in the frigid skies over Europe, American pilots would learn that the fatal environment of high-altitude warfare itself was their most persistent foe, not only the Luftwaffe or the Flak cannon batteries. For the bombers, this was no problem. For the bomber crews, this was another story. The interior of a B-17 was like a lightweight aluminum cigar tube, observed waist gunner Jack Novy. 10 men are crowded into a claustrophobic space tighter than a submarine. The aluminum skin is so thin you could poke through it with a screwdriver. The waist gunners stand nearly back to back, jostling for maneuvering room while fighting the enemy. Flying these fully loaded 27-ton behemoths requires extraordinary skill. As one air surgeon described it, reduce your office to a 5-foot cube size, engulf it in the constant roar of engines, and increase your height to around 5 miles. That will give you an idea of the normal conditions under which these men worked. As they ascended amid erratic weather, the crew had to stay focused despite the claustrophobic and noisy conditions within. Cloud cover sometimes extends to 7 kilometers, forcing pilots to fly blind on instruments. Ascending in darkness, some become hopelessly disoriented and crash into other bombers. Breaking out of the overcast revealed a breathtaking scene, co-pilot Jacobs wrote. The sun was just coming up, and we were now above a carpet of reddish-orange cotton as far as the eye could see. Other airplanes were breaking out of the overcast and looked like fish coming up out of their element. Over the North Sea, gunners clear their machine guns. When they fire together, the entire plane shakes. Then it grows quiet, only the monotonous roar of engines remaining as men prepare mentally for combat. Everyone wears inflatable Mae West jackets and parachute harnesses, though many have never been trained to use them. Some tie extra boots to their belts in case they bail out over Nazi-occupied Europe. Each carries a small escape kit, money, first aid supplies, a waterproof silk map, compass, and ration. As they pushed higher into the sky, the crew entered a world unlike any they had known, an alien battlefield of freezing cold and thin air. As they ascend into the substratosphere, they enter a profoundly different world. Their first battle is with the cold, an invisible enemy, waiting at 6 kilometers altitude. New electrically heated suits are available for only 2 or 3 crew members per bomber. The rest shiver in alpaca clothing and sheepskin boots. In the rear, waist gunners slide, like donkeys on ice, on piles of spent shells, Arctic-like wind blasting their faces. Their breath escapes into oxygen masks, fogging goggles that solidify into ice. Once or twice I let go of the gun with one hand, to reach up and scrape a hole in the goggle ice with my fingertip, recalled Gunner John Morris. But the ice would start to form again right away. A blinded gunner. But I survived, with German cannon holes in his plane, big enough to shove sheep through. When flak fills the sky, it's so thick the men can smell it through their oxygen masks. Often concussions would have driven pilots through the roofs of their planes had they not been strapped in. On some planes, airmen sit on armor plate to protect their genitals. This is when men learn it's possible to sweat at 40 degrees below zero. In combat, these crews sometimes had to deal with horrific injuries. In one case, an airman's butt cheeks were blown off. The bleeding from his wounds continued, so we put a 140-pound ammunition box directly over the wound, one gunner recalled. The pressure seemed to stop the bleeding. He rested comfortably, but was almost frozen because his heated suit was torn, and we had no blankets available. When a gun jams in combat, panicked men sometimes pull off thick gloves to clear it. Their hands stick to bare metal, tearing off strips of flesh when pulled away. Some, overcome with fear, deliberately remove gloves, ensuring a painful hospital stay, but temporary reprieve from combat. Electric suits short out from the same steel that pierces flesh. As they lie unconscious on freezing floors, extremities go numb despite crewmates' efforts with thin blankets. Beyond obvious injuries, however, the biggest invisible threat at these elevations was oxygen deprivation. It is perilous for anyone flying a bomber because hypoxia, which happens when the body doesn't get enough oxygen, can cause dizziness, confusion, and poor judgment. Even worse is anoxia, which is a total loss of oxygen that, if left untreated, can cause unconsciousness and death in a matter of minutes. Knowing these circumstances makes it easier to understand why oxygen systems practically saved the airmen's lives. It's altogether too easy to have a leak in your mask or hose and be totally unaware of the problem, a navigator explained. Without oxygen at this altitude, you're unconscious in 30 seconds. After 2 minutes, you're dead. High-altitude aerial combat subjected bomber crews to stresses humans had never faced before. Men's ears clogged painfully, minds and movements slowed, and stomachs expanded inordinately. A condition worsened by gaseous breakfast food, reduced operations by 45% throughout the war. Aborted missions meant that the air crews had to remain in the war for longer. Canceled missions wasn't subtracted from their required wartime flight hours. Repeated cancellations meant repeated pre-flight trauma and tension, with symptoms including vomiting and diarrhea. Men reported unanimously that the letdown following cancellations was far worse than actual participation in a combat flight. Unlike infantry, airmen couldn't fight without complex technological support. When it failed, they were helpless. In the 8th's first year, 1,634 men were removed from duty for frostbite, over 400 more than for combat wounds. Some had to live with amputated noses, ears, fingers, toes, and even removed eyes for the rest of their lives. When available, the new electrical suits were undependable. They often shorted out, shocking hands, feet, and testicles. To make the situation worse, After missions, exhausted men damaged the fragile heating elements by stuffing them carelessly into lockers. This was a direct result of poor training. Ball turret gunners forced to remain in position for hours sometimes urinated in their clothing, freezing their backs, buttocks, and thighs so badly muscles sloughed and bones were exposed. As gunner George Moffett observed, "By the time you reach your objective, you are so miserably fed up you don't particularly give a damn whether you get it or not." This alien battlefield doubled the strain. That's the thing that doubles the strain on your nerves. The environment in which your guts have to digest danger is unnatural, noted one airman who survived to tell his story, carrying the invisible scars of a war fought as much against nature as against human enemies. Their fortitude was put to the test by the surroundings, but they were constantly in danger of death from opposing fighters and the mayhem of combat. Bomber crews had to contend with the scary threat of friendly fire, in addition to the lethal cold and flak. The danger in the air was increased when Allied fighters occasionally, unintentionally targeted their own bombers in the confusion of massive formations and fierce fighting. Every mission was a nerve-wracking test of cooperation and trust, since it was hard to identify and communicate over the din of engines and the pandemonium of warfare. The introduction of a new and powerful German fighter, the Focke-Wulf FW-190, increased the threat. The FW-190 was first introduced in 1941, and among Allied flyers, it immediately had a reputation for being terrifying. It was superior to many previous Allied fighters in speed, maneuverability, and weaponry, and it constituted a significant threat to the bomber formations. The air combat over Europe became more urgent and intense, and the 8th Air Force was forced to make quick tactical adjustments due to its unexpected appearance. Fortunately for the USAAF, the introduction of the P-51 Mustang would soon be able to provide air cover across longer ranges of about 2,600 kilometers. This aircraft would prove to be a significant threat to the FW-190 and is often described as one of the best fighters from the war. As it became more prevalent and Nazi power dwindled, bombers were better protected towards the end of the main B-17 era. America's bomber crews waged a two-front struggle in the skies over Europe, one against the deadly physics of high-altitude flight, and another against Hitler's Reich. These young men tested the limits of human endurance in ways never seen before in history, at 6.5 kilometers above the Earth, where temperatures dropped dangerously low, and the lack of air itself turned into an enemy. Sweat instantly froze on their foreign battlefield, and even a minor piece of equipment malfunctioning could be as deadly as enemy fire. However, the information they gained from their suffering would revolutionize aviation. Pressurized cabins, dependable oxygen systems, and protective equipment that made flying at high altitudes commonplace, rather than exceptional. 5 miles above the ground and in conflict, these airmen penned the first chapters of modern aerospace medicine. Every high-altitude military aircraft and pressurized airliner bears witness to individuals who first entered the stratosphere with bravery, rudimentary gear, and the determination to survive and operate in a place that was never intended for human habitation. If you like this sort of content and want to see more, please like and subscribe.